We're here to talk about the X99 serviceability. Today we're going to talk about components or tools necessary and what's necessary to service the lumbar, seat depth, service the fabric, changing the arms out, and then finally a tear down to the control. Tools necessary to take care of all of these are first a T30 bit, Torx 30 bit, and a box ratchet. Number 2 Phillips screwdriver, T30 screwdriver, 5 millimeter Allen T handle, T20 screwdriver, and a rubber mallet.
To put the lumbar in, you position one side of the lumbar. Can you hold the chair?
Yep. On
the slot, you put the other side in at an angle, and then just twist it in place. To remove it, you do the same thing, just twist it out. Hold the chair. To remove the seat depth adjustment, you're going to need a 5 millimeter ball end. You got 4 5 millimeter cap screws here, 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 and here. This whole unit is spring loaded, so when you remove these screws, this black plastic section is going to spring back. So we'll go ahead and remove these right now. Notice when we removed the seat depth adjustment, you see here that this cap screw here is the retainer for this end of the spring, and this whole unit is spring loaded. When we remove the other side, you notice that we backed the cap screw off all the way and the spring fell out. So when you take this apart, you may have to put that back together by stretching the spring between the cap screw and this little post. Okay, now to service the upholstered portion of the seat depth, you're going to need to take the retainers apart on either side of the seat depth. You may also get service calls for these units jamming up because they rotate for 3 different levels of adjustment for seat depth, and the clutch mechanism interior to this sometimes jams up. In taking this apart, we'll show you how to remedy that as well. The first thing you need to do is remove this plastic retainer. I'm using this tool, but a common awl or possibly even a flathead screwdriver would work for this. So come in here and pop this up. And any prying instrument, again, a flathead screwdriver so that you don't break the plastic, to remove this piece. Again, using an awl, there's an E-clip here around this axle, which this whole mechanism rotates on. You need to get in there with your awl and pull out this E-clip right here. You can then slide off this retainer mechanism. That exposes this clutch, and inside is a spring. The clutch is handed, The clutch is handed, so you can't put the wrong clutch in the wrong side. Okay? You would do the same procedure on the other side, which would then leave you with just the upholstered part. You would take your service part and put the whole mechanism back together again, the same way that you took it apart. To assemble the seat depth adjustment back together, you start by placing the spring back into the hole. You put the handed clutch in, and again, the clutch is keyed and handed. You cannot physically put the wrong clutch into the wrong side. Take your retainer assembly, put it in place, and take your E-clip and put that back in place. Take your plastic retainer and snap it back over. To assemble a seat depth adjustment back onto the chair, because again, you can order just this upholstered part as a serviceable item or the entire assembly. Again, you need to make sure that your screw is properly seated on the back cap screw and on the post, as this section is spring loaded. Place the unit in place over the T-nuts, which are in the seat pan, and then extend with your thumbs to preload the spring and fasten all 4 cap screws back in place. This is what the seat depth adjustment looks like when it is put back on the chair. If you are adding a seat depth to a chair that has not had it previously, you are going to have to put a new seat pad, which is actually a little bit shorter in length, on the chair at the time you retrofit the new seat depth on. And when installed properly, you should be able to pull this out and rotate it to 3 positions to provide 3 additional levels of seat depth. What we're going to show you now is how to service the mesh if the mesh is torn or you have the mesh as a replacement item. The first thing you'll need to do is remove the seat. There are 2 Phillips screws on the underside corners of the seat which you need to remove. The seat has 3 snap fits along the back side, which you need to pull up and then slide the seat forward because it engages with these 2 flange pieces into the bottom seat pan. You then need to remove the lumbar. And with your T20 driver, remove the 4 screws from the bottom side of the aluminum crossbar. You then can remove the mesh stretcher piece, which now leaves you free to remove the damaged mesh back, which you can do by just pulling, starting from a corner and working your way all the way up to the top. You then remove the mesh by pulling up and unseating the wire rod that is threaded through the top of the mesh. When you receive a new piece of mesh, you'll have to reuse your wire rod, which is encased in this piece of foam. You'll have to thread that through the top of the mesh, and this piece is already done. This is easiest done when the uprights are on the chair. You then put the wire rod into the holes in the top of the upright. Thread the sides down into the slots. And now you need a mallet to pound the spline in. And you need to, you can't take the spline and just fold it once and pound it in. As in, here's your spline, you can't take it like this and just pound it in this way. You need to take it and fold it so that it's underneath. And then starting at the top, you just tap it in place. And you want to pull down as you're tapping it. To allow the bottom stretcher piece to come down to the crossbar as much as possible, as that will make it easier to put the plastic mesh stretcher piece back on. Again, fold it over. Work around the arm, just tap it all in, and now you replace the plastic mesh stretcher piece by putting it in underneath the cap screws located here and here. Holding that in place, you put the 4 T20 screws back into the bottom. If you over tighten these screws, you'll break the plastic bosses on the bottom side of this piece. So don't over tighten those. It's important to note that this is for the mesh only version. You cannot take an upholstered back version of this chair and retrofit with mesh without purchasing the plastic aluminum uprights. Furthermore, on the upholstered version with lumbar, if the lumbar goes bad, the customer will have to order a whole new back with lumbar, because the lumbar components of the upholstered back are contained within the sewn back, and you cannot get inside of them to repair the lumbar. After you've got the mesh put back on, you can put your seat back on. These 2 flanged tabs, here and here, first need to mate into these 2 holes on the seat pan. Once they're engaged, you push back and then press the snap fits along the back edge back in and replace the 2 Phillips screws in the back corner. Now we'll show you how to change the tilt tension crank. For this, you're going to need a T20 driver. You open up the tilt tension crank, assuming it's broken or defective. There's a screw in here, which you remove. This comes out. There are 3 pieces to this assembly. You have the screw, the arm, and the arm snaps into this assembly here. All 3 of these pieces should come to you assembled. Okay, so to replace it, you have your assembled part. You need to make sure that your cable inside of here engages into the square slot in the plastic piece. So you'll need to work with your left hand to flex that cable to put it into the square hole. You then tighten down the T20 screw. And by adjusting it and feeling that there's tension there, and by observing on the underside, on the top side of the control, you can see this piece in here spinning, you know that it's properly installed. The tension on the chair comes adjusted from the plant at mid torque. Mid torque is 90 turns from 0. Full torque is 180 turns of this crank.
All right.
Now we're going to talk about replacement of the arms. It's important to note here that these arm caps and subcaps, being the bottom substrate for this arm here, this piece, these are the German versions of these arm caps. The US version is a little bit different, and we do not offer this hard plastic arm cap, but they assemble the same way. And the US version offers a gel cap, the vinyl soft cap, and an upholstered arm cap. All three of which are retrofittable onto the same subcap and assemble the same way as any others. To replace an arm cap, there are 2 T20 screws on the bottom side. You need to then slide the arm back to access the back one. And then you remove the arm cap. You can then replace with, again, an upholstered gel or soft or vinyl cap, whatever the customer chooses, just by reassembling and putting the screws back in. To remove the arm, you're going to need to take the entire back off the chair to access these 4 screws that hold it onto the aluminum upright. To do that, you're going to need to remove the mesh stretcher retainer piece here and these 4 5mm cap screws that hold the plastic uprights to the aluminum. So I'll start by removing these 4 screws with a T20 driver. And remove your mesh stretcher piece. With a 5mm ball end, you take out these cap screws. Now you can remove the entire back assembly with the mesh still intact. After the back's removed, you expose the 4 T30 flathead screws that attach the arm slide to the aluminum upright. To remove that, I'm going to use a T30 bit and a driver. Need to remove 2 and then move the arm up to expose the other 2. This will give you your arm. The arms will come as service parts with the slides already greased. It's a special calcium-based grease that is used on these arms that is applied at the plant. So you should not apply any white lithium or Teflon based or other type of grease to the arm, because it will promote chemical reaction between the steel and nylon slide, which at application might not feel like it is hindering arm movement, but over time will actually gum up the arm. So you should receive a serviceable arm like this, which you can then attach back to the upright just as we removed it. One other important note is that the arm comes with what is called in the bill of material a spring shackle. It is just a plastic piece with crush features on it. This piece goes on the back side of the arm. between the steel plate and the C-bracket that slides on the nylon slide. This piece is a tolerance eater between this steel bracket and the upright and takes away the slop in the arm. So you need to be careful when you put the arm back on that that piece doesn't fall out like it did right there. Okay? You may be able to take a little bit of grease and put it on there just to hold it in place so that when you put it back on, this piece right here is riding between this flat piece of steel and the aluminum upright. Okay, now we're going to show you how to service these black plastic paddles which activate the pneumatic as well as the back block. Okay, in order to do this, you're going to have to first remove the lumbar and the seat as well as the entire back assembly, which we've done previously already. And with the chair in this condition, using a T30 driver, you remove the 4 screws from the plastic seat panel. That then exposes the cradle as well as the top of the control. The paddles are held on each by 2 Phillips screws, one on the top side and one on the bottom side. Once you have both screws out, this is a snap fit 2-piece design. You can get it off by just pulling up on it. The threads for these pieces are cut into small black plastic stopper pieces, as they're called in the bill of material. These pieces are keyed and they fit into the holes. These pieces are keyed and they fit into the holes in a certain orientation, and the screws drive in and cut the threads. That makes these 2 pieces universal to both sides. You'll notice that the right side has a stopper on the front and no screw on the top here, so you've got a screw in the bottom, 2 screws in the bottom on the right side. On the left side you have an exposed hole. The screw comes down from the top, and on the bottom you have again another one of these black plastic pieces that the threads cut into on the front. So to replace them, you put them back on, snap them into place, and then put your screw in from the bottom. On this side, one from the top and one from the bottom on the sitter's left. And that's how you service the black paddles. From there, we're going to show you how to completely tear the chair down to the cradle by removing the uprights and exposing the rollers on the cradle and the raw control. Whether you wait until this point or whether you do it in the beginning, you're going to need to remove the tension crank again with your T20 driver by removing the screw. You then need to remove only one of these T30 screws in the back crossbar. For that, you're going to need to use a T30 bit with a box wrench to first break the screw free. And once it's broken free, you can use a standard T30 driver. With that complete, you'll need to remove both black paddles, which again, you remove the 2 screws, pop the paddle to take it off. Now to remove the aluminum uprights, there are 2 teeth, one on each side, 2 T30 screws, one on each side, located in this area and in this area, which are only accessible with a small box wrench and a T30 bit. You'll want to remove the screw on the same side as the screw you removed from the aluminum crossbar. I removed this screw here, so I'll remove this one on this side. That's just going to make it easier to take the entire assembly apart. With that screw loose, you can then tap the upright out, which exposes the cradle. There are rollers on the cradle, as well as this black roller, which actually slides in the slots on the upright. This black roller slides back and forth in here, and these 2 rollers roll back and forth. There should only be grease in the center slot of the upright. There should only be grease applied on the axle of these rollers. If grease is applied to the surface of the rollers will flatten out, as they will not be allowed to roll, and they will degrade down to a flat surface and ultimately break and fall out onto the carpeting. To remove the other upright, you would just remove the same screw on the inside, which will release the upright from the cradle and expose the same 2 rollers, white and 1 roller black, on the left side. To remove the cradle at this point, all you would need to do is remove this 10mm hex nut, remove the rollers, and then remove the 6mm shoulder screw, which engages into the control to release the linkage arms, and then you can service the cradle if you ever need to do that.